Era woke every morning to the smell of her own flesh burning. The silver bands around her wrists never stopped their work. Pure silver, 3 inches wide, locked tight against her skin with no gap for air or healing. They had been there for 10 years, burning constantly. The metal's toxicity to shifters ensuring that her wolf remained suppressed, caged, unable to surface no matter how desperately it clawed for freedom. The scars were permanent. Layers upon layers of burned tissue that would never fully heal as long as the silver remained. The bands had been fitted when she was 12 years old, and in the decades since, they had become part of her. A constant source of agony that she had learned to endure, to ignore, to accept as the price of survival. She was an alpha female, the rarest and most reviled category of shifter, not supposed to exist according to pack law and tradition. Abominations, they were called, unnatural. Against the order established by the moon goddess herself. Alpha was a male designation, Omega a female one. Those who defied this natural order were mistakes to be corrected. Era's correction had been silver bands that would suppress her alpha wolf forever, or until the constant burning finally killed her. Whichever came first. She rose from her narrow bed in the servants' quarters of Ironmore Pack's great house, moving carefully to avoid jarring her wrists. Even the slightest movement sent fresh waves of pain through the burned flesh, pain she had learned to keep from showing on her face. She wrapped cloth bandages over the bands as she did every morning, hiding the worst of the damage from casual observers, maintaining the fiction that she was simply a sickly beta with weak constitution. The lie had protected her for 10 years. As long as the bands stayed on, as long as her alpha wolf remained suppressed, she could live quietly in Ironmore, doing menial work, invisible and unremarkable. It was not much of a life, but it was life. The alternative, being discovered as an alpha female, would mean execution or worse. Era had been 12 when they discovered what she was. It happened during her first shift, the moment every young wolf experienced when their animal nature finally surfaced. Most children shifted easily, their wolves emerging healthy and normal, conforming to expected patterns. Males displayed alpha, beta, or omega traits. Females displayed omega or beta traits. That was how it was supposed to work. The ceremony had been planned for weeks. First shifts were communal events in Ironmore Pack, celebrated with the entire pack gathered to witness a child's entry into their true heritage. Era's 12th birthday had passed 3 days prior, and the pack elders had declared her ready for the transformation. Her parents had been proud, excited to see what kind of wolf their daughter would become. Era remembered standing in the ceremonial circle, surrounded by hundreds of pack members, their expectations heavy in the air. Her mother had squeezed her hand one final time before stepping back to give her space. Her father had smiled encouragingly from the crowd. Everything had seemed perfect, normal, exactly as it should be. The shift itself had been more painful than anyone warned her it would be. Her bones had felt like they were shattering and reforming, her muscles tearing and rebuilding, her entire body transforming in ways that made her want to scream. She had fallen to her knees, gasping through the agony, feeling her human form give way to something else entirely. And when the transformation completed, when she stood on 4 legs for the first time, the silence had been absolute. Era's wolf was massive, larger than any female wolf should be, nearly matching the size of full-grown male alphas. Her silver-white fur had been striking, gleaming in the ceremonial firelight like moonlight given form. But it was not her size or coloring that made every wolf present freeze in shock. It was the presence radiating from her, pure alpha dominance, power that made even adult wolves instinctively lower their heads in submission. She was an alpha, female, impossible, wrong. The first sound came from Elder Merrick, who stood from his seat among the pack elders with an expression of absolute horror. "This cannot be," he said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "This is not possible. Females cannot be alphas. This is a corruption, an abomination against the natural order. Other elders began murmuring agreement, their voices rising in a crescendo of shock and disgust. Ira did not understand what was happening, did not comprehend why the celebration had turned into something dark and frightening. She looked for her parents, seeking reassurance, seeking someone to explain what was wrong. Her father's face had gone pale, his expression shifting from pride to horror to shame in rapid succession. He was staring at Ira's wolf form as if she had become something monstrous, something that disgusted him. Her mother had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, but not tears of joy, tears of devastation. "This is your daughter?" Elder Merrick demanded, turning to Ira's father. "You sired this abomination?" "I did not know," her father said quickly, desperately. "I swear I did not know this was possible. There has never been anything like this in our bloodline. I do not understand how this happened." "It does not matter how it happened," another elder said. "What matters is correcting it before this corruption spreads. An alpha female threatens everything our society is built upon. If word spreads that such things are possible, it will undermine male authority, challenge the hierarchy, create chaos." "She is just a child," Era's mother said weakly, though her voice carried no conviction. "Surely there is some explanation, some mistake in the shift. Perhaps if she tries again?" "There is no mistake," Marek said flatly. "Look at her. Feel the dominance radiating from that wolf. This is not a beta who shifted incorrectly. This is an alpha female, a corruption of nature itself, and she must be corrected immediately." Era tried to shift back to human form, tried to escape the wolf shape that was causing such horror, but she did not know how. She was trapped in this form that everyone found so revolting, unable to defend herself, or explain or do anything, except stand there while the pack elders debated her fate. "Execution would be cleanest," one elder suggested. "Simply put the abomination down before it becomes aware of what it is." "No," Marek said, though not out of mercy. "Execution would raise questions. Others would want to know why. Better to correct the issue, to suppress this alpha wolf so thoroughly that it can never surface again. Let her live, but ensure she lives as she should have been born, as a proper beta female." "How?" Era's father asked. "How do we suppress an alpha wolf permanently?" "Silver," the pack's silversmith said, stepping forward from the crowd. His name was Torvin, and he had made jewelry and ceremonial items for Ironmore for decades. "Silver suppresses shifter abilities. In small amounts, it causes discomfort. In larger amounts, direct contact with skin, it can prevent shifting entirely. If we were to make bands, thick, tight, locked directly against her wrists, where the silver concentration would be highest, it would cage her alpha wolf permanently. The silver would burn her constantly," someone objected. "Direct contact for an extended period would cause severe damage." "Better that than allowing an alpha female to exist uncorrected," Marek said. "The discomfort is a small price for ensuring she never accesses this abomination again." "Torvin, can you make such bands?" "I can," Torvin confirmed. "I would need precise measurements to ensure they fit tight enough. And I would need to craft locks that cannot be picked or removed without a key that only I possess. But yes, I can make suppression bands that will cage an alpha wolf for life." "Then do so," Mara commanded, "immediately. We will hold the child until the bands are ready." They kept Ira in wolf form in a silver-lined cage while Torvin crafted the bands. It took 3 days where Ira remained trapped in the shape that everyone hated, unable to shift back, barely able to move in the cramped cage. The silver bars burned wherever she touched them, leaving marks on her fur and skin that did not heal. She whimpered constantly, frightened and confused and desperate for her parents to come rescue her. But they never came. Her father visited once, staring at her through the bars with an expression of deep shame. "This is for your own good," he told her, though his voice held no conviction. "You will understand someday. We are saving you, Era. This is mercy." Her mother did not visit at all. On the fourth day, Torvin arrived with the completed bands. They were 3 inches wide, made of pure silver, with intricate locks built into the design. The inside surface was smooth, but would rest directly against skin, with no gap for air or healing. They were instruments of torture, disguised as correction. They dragged Era from the cage and forced her to shift back to human form, though the process was agonizing after being locked as a wolf for days. When she was finally human again, naked and shivering and terrified, they held her down while Torvin fitted the bands. Era screamed when the silver first touched her wrists. The burning was immediate and excruciating. Unlike anything she had experienced, she begged them to stop, promised to be good, to never shift again, to do anything they wanted if they would just remove the silver. But they ignored her pleas, forcing her arms straight while Torvin positioned the bands and locked them tight. The tighter the better, Marek instructed. No gap for healing. Constant contact, constant suppression. Torvin tightened the bands until they cut into Era's flesh, until she could not slip even a fingernail between metal and skin. The locks clicked shut with finality, and he handed the only keys to Marek. These bands will not come off without these keys. The silver is pure and will burn constantly. Her wolf will be suppressed within days, caged completely within weeks. She will be unable to shift while wearing them. Perfect, Marek said. He looked down at Ira, who was sobbing on the floor, her wrists already blistering from the silver. You will wear these until you die. They are your correction, your punishment for being born wrong. But know this, child, we are being merciful. Other packs would simply execute an alpha female. We are allowing you to live. Be grateful. They left her there. A 12-year-old child with silver burning into her wrists, her alpha wolf already beginning to retreat from the agony. Over the following days, Era learned what constant silver exposure meant. The burns never healed because the source never moved. Her flesh blistered, blackened, peeled away, tried to regenerate, and burned again in an endless cycle. The pain was unrelenting, a constant scream from her wrists that never diminished, never grew bearable, simply became her new normal. Within a week, her alpha wolf was caged so deeply that she could barely sense it. Within 2 weeks, she could not access it at all, could not shift no matter how desperately she tried. The suppression was complete. Era was no longer an alpha female. She was a broken child with permanently scarred wrists, living with metal burning into her flesh every moment of every day. Her parents never apologized. They acted as if the bands were a reasonable solution to an unfortunate problem, as if their daughter's constant agony was preferable to the shame of having birthed an alpha female. Era learned quickly that she would receive no sympathy, no help, no reprieve. This was her life now. This was what she deserved for being born wrong. That had been 10 years ago. Era was 22 now, and the bands had never been removed, not once in a decade. The flesh beneath had burned away and tried to heal and burned away again in an endless cycle, leaving scar tissue so thick that she could barely feel anything else in her wrists. The pain had become such a constant that she had almost forgotten what her arms felt like without it. The first year had been the hardest in terms of acute suffering. At 12 years old, Era's body was still growing, but the silver bands did not expand with her. They became tighter as her wrists tried to grow, the metal cutting deeper, the burning intensifying. She spent most of that first year crying herself to sleep, the agony so intense that nothing else existed beyond it. Her parents moved her to the servants' quarters after 3 months, unable to bear having a constant reminder of their shame living in the family home. Era was given a tiny room in the back of the pack house and told she would work for her keep. At 12, still adjusting to bands that never stopped burning, she was expected to begin earning the right to continue living in Ironmore. The work started simple: cleaning, carrying, basic tasks that even a child could manage. But as Era grew older, and the band's effects became more profound. She found even simple work exhausting. The constant silver exposure weakened her entire body, not just her wrists. Her healing was severely compromised. Her strength never developed as it should have. She remained perpetually frail, perpetually struggling, perpetually in pain. Year 2 brought the first serious infection. The burns beneath the bands had never properly healed, and bacteria eventually found the open wounds. Era developed a fever so high that she became delirious, her body fighting an infection it was too weak to overcome on its own. The pack healer treated her with strong antibiotics, though her expression suggested she believed Era would die. "The silver needs to come off," the healer told Elder Marek bluntly. "The infection is spreading. If the bands remain, she will likely die from sepsis." "Then she dies," Marek had said with chilling indifference. "Better that than removing her correction. If she survives the infection, she will be stronger for it. If she does not, then the problem resolves itself." Era survived, though she never knew how. The fever broke after 5 days, the infection gradually clearing with continued antibiotics. But the close call taught her that her life had exactly as much value as the pack deemed it had, which was essentially none. She was a corrected abomination, allowed to live only as long as she caused no trouble and asked for nothing. Year 3 was when the nerve damage became apparent. Constant silver exposure was destroying the nerves in her wrists and hands, causing numbness in her fingers, weakness in her grip, occasional shooting pains that felt like lightning running from wrist to fingertips. The pack healer warned that permanent nerve damage was likely inevitable, that Era might lose function in her hands entirely if the bands remained much longer. No one cared. The bands stayed on. Year 4 brought the realization that her wolf was essentially dead, not literally. She could still sense a dim presence deep inside her, buried under layers of silver-induced suppression, but functionally dead. She had not accessed her wolf form in 2 years, could not shift no matter how she tried, could barely remember what it felt like to be anything except human, and in pain. This was when depression set in properly. Era spent most of Year 4 simply going through motions, working when required, sleeping when possible, existing without really living. What was the point of survival when survival meant nothing but endless suffering? She was 14 years old and already wished she were dead. Year 5 she attempted to remove the bands herself. Late one night, alone in her tiny room, she used a knife to try prying the locks open. She worked for hours, her hands slick with blood from where she had cut herself in the attempt. But the locks would not budge. Torvin had crafted them too well. They were designed to be permanent, to resist any attempt at removal. Finally, exhausted and defeated, Era had given up and simply wept until dawn. Year 6 was marked by growing acceptance. This was her life. The bands would never come off. She would live with constant pain until the cumulative damage killed her, probably before she reached 30. There was no escape, no rescue, no hope for anything better. Accepting this reality made it somewhat easier to bear, though easier was relative when every moment still involved metal burning into flesh. She learned to cope in small ways. Wrapping her wrists in cloth bandages provided minimal protection from accidental impacts that would jar the bands and send fresh agony through her arms. Working in the kitchens kept her away from pack social activities where she might be questioned about her condition. Keeping her head down and her ambitions non-existent meant no one paid attention to her. Year 7 brought arthritis. The constant inflammation from the silver burns had spread to the joints in her wrists and hands, causing pain even beyond what the bands created directly. Her fingers began to swell, her wrist mobility decreased, her grip strength became almost non-existent. Simple tasks like holding a knife or lifting a pot became challenges that required careful planning and execution. The pack healer, a different one now, as the previous healer had retired, examined Era's wrists and hands with barely concealed disgust. The joint damage is permanent. The arthritis will only worsen with time. You will likely lose most hand function before you are 30. Can anything be done? Era asked, though she already knew the answer. Remove the bands, the healer said flatly. That is the only solution. But since that will not happen, no. Nothing can be done. You will simply continue deteriorating until your hands are essentially useless. Year 8 was when Era stopped feeling most sensation in her fingers. The nerve damage had progressed to the point where she could barely feel anything below her wrists. She dropped things constantly, unable to gauge grip pressure. She cut herself regularly while cooking because she could not feel the knife properly. Her hands had become partially dead appendages attached to wrists that never stopped burning. This was also the year she overheard other servants talking about her. She should just kill herself, one woman said casually, as if discussing the weather. What kind of life is that? Constant pain, useless hands, no future. Death would be a mercy. Part of Ira agreed, but another part, stubborn, refusing to give the elders the satisfaction, insisted on surviving. She would live out of spite if nothing else. Year 9 brought the realization that her bones were weakening. The silver exposure was affecting her calcium absorption, her bone density decreasing to dangerous levels. She fractured her left wrist, not the one with burns, but the actual bone beneath the band, simply from catching herself during a fall. The fracture did not heal properly, leaving that wrist permanently weakened. The pack healer who set the fracture had looked at Era with something approaching pity. Your body is breaking down. The silver toxicity is systemic now, affecting everything. You have maybe 5 years left, possibly less. I am sorry. Era was 21 years old and being told she had maybe 5 years to live. She felt nothing hearing it. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, what difference did it make when every day was the same suffering? Year 10 was the year Alpha King Damon arrived in Ironmore. Era was 22, had worn the silver bands for a decade, and had long since stopped hoping for rescue or relief. She woke each morning, smelled her own flesh burning, wrapped her wrists in cloth to hide the worst of the damage, and went about her work with mechanical efficiency. She had become very good at being invisible, at moving through spaces without drawing attention, at existing without really living. The bands had accomplished their purpose. Her alpha wolf was so deeply suppressed that she barely remembered what it felt like to be anything except human and broken. And then Damon saw her drop a tray, saw the glimpse of silver and burned flesh beneath her bandages. And everything Ira had endured for 10 years came crashing down in a single moment of exposure. The suppression worked. Her alpha wolf was caged so deeply that Era could barely sense it anymore, could barely feel the presence that should have been as natural as breathing. She lived as a beta, weak and sickly from the constant silver exposure, unable to shift, unable to access any of the strength or power that should have been hers by right. She worked in the packhouse kitchens, doing menial labor that required no shifting, and drew no attention. She kept her head down, her wrists covered, her true nature hidden. She endured the pain and the suppression, and the knowledge that this was her entire existence. Surviving day to day, with metal burning into her flesh, her wolf screaming soundlessly in its silver cage. And then, Alpha King Damon came to Ironmore for an inspection, and everything Era had endured for 10 years came crashing down. The announcement of the Alpha King's visit sent Ironmore into frenzied preparation. Damon was known throughout the Northern Territories as both powerful and just, enforcing laws that protected pack members while demanding accountability from alphas who abused their authority. His inspections were thorough, his judgments final, and his presence commanded absolute respect. Era had no reason to interact with him. She was kitchen staff, invisible, beneath the notice of visiting royalty. She would simply continue her work and wait for him to leave. But on the third day of Damon's visit, Era was carrying a tray of dishes when she stumbled on uneven stone, her weakened body lacking the coordination to catch herself. The tray fell, dishes shattering, and Era landed hard on her hands and knees. The impact jarred her wrists, sending fresh agony through the burned flesh, and she could not suppress the gasp of pain that escaped. Strong hands caught her shoulders, helping her up. "Are you injured?" a male voice asked, deep and concerned. Era looked up into storm-gray eyes and realized with horror that Alpha King Damon himself had witnessed her clumsiness. "I am fine, my lord," she said quickly, trying to pull away. "Just clumsy. I apologize for the disturbance." But Damon's grip did not release. His eyes had moved to her wrists, where the impact had shifted the cloth bandages, revealing a glimpse of silver and burned flesh beneath. His expression changed instantly from concern to sharp focus. "What is that on your wrists?" he demanded. "Nothing, my lord. Old injury. Please, I must clean this mess." Era tried again to pull away, panic rising as she realized her secret was seconds from exposure. "Let me see your wrists," Damon said. And this time there was alpha command in his voice that made disobedience nearly impossible. "Now." Era's hands moved without conscious decision, unwrapping the cloth bandages to reveal the silver bands beneath. The metal gleamed dully in the afternoon light, and the flesh visible at the edges was angry red and black, burned away in some places to expose deeper tissue, scarred beyond recognition in others. Damon stared at her wrists with an expression that cycled through shock, horror, and fury in rapid succession. He was silent for a long moment, simply staring at the evidence of a decade of torture. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "Explain these bands to me. Every detail. Who put them on you, when, and why? And if you tell me they were your choice, I will know you are lying." Era swallowed hard. There was no escape now, no deflection that would satisfy an Alpha King who had seen the evidence of her suffering. "They were put on 10 years ago. When I was 12, the pack elders ordered it." "Why?" Damon pressed, his eyes never leaving her wrists. What could a 12-year-old child have possibly done to deserve this torture? "I shifted for the first time," Era said, the words emerging hollow and detached. "My wolf was alpha, female. The elders said it was an abomination, that alpha females cannot exist, that I needed to be corrected. The bands suppress my wolf. Keep it caged. Ensure I live as I should have been born, as a proper beta female." The silence that followed was absolute. Damon was staring at her with an expression she could not read, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. When he spoke again, his voice carried barely controlled rage. "They tortured a child. They locked silver bands, pure silver from the look of it, directly against the skin of a 12-year-old girl. They burned her constantly for 10 years because her wolf was alpha and she was female." "Is that what you are telling me?" "Yes, my lord," Era whispered. "And your parents? Where were they when this was done to you?" "Present. My father agreed it was necessary. My mother said nothing." Ira looked away, unable to meet Damon's eyes. "They moved me to servants' quarters after 3 months. I have not spoken to either of them in years." Damon's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his entire body radiating fury barely held in check. "Alpha females are not abominations. They are rare, yes, but they are blessed by the moon goddess just as any other wolf. The fact that ignorant traditions have tried to erase them does not make their existence wrong." He moved closer to Era, his presence overwhelming, but somehow not threatening. "These bands are killing you. I can see it. Feel it. You are weak, damaged, dying slowly from a decade of constant silver exposure. How long before the toxicity becomes fatal? 5 years? 3? The healer said 5 years, Era admitted. Maybe less, but my lord, there is nothing to be done. The bands are locked. Only the pack silversmith has the keys. And even if they came off, my wolf has been suppressed so long that I am not sure it would surface again. I am essentially human now. A very damaged human. No, Damon said firmly. You are a suppressed alpha female who has survived a decade of torture that would have killed most wolves years ago. That takes strength, Era, not weakness. But these bans end now. Today. I will not leave Ironmore knowing a child was tortured and continues to be tortured under my authority. You cannot remove them without the keys, Era protested, and Torvin will not give them to you. He answers to the pack elders, not to visiting royalty. Then I will not ask Torvin, Damon said. His hands moved to her left wrist, his grip gentle despite the determination in his eyes. I will simply break the locks. It will hurt you. I cannot remove bands that have been locked in place for 10 years without causing damage. But Era, they have to come off. You cannot continue like this. My lord, please. Era started, but Damon cut her off. Tell me you want to keep wearing them. Tell me you want to continue burning, continue dying slowly, continue living with metal destroying your flesh every moment. Tell me that is what you want, and I will leave them in place. But if any part of you wants to be free, wants a chance at healing, wants to know what life could be without this torture, then let me help you. Era looked at her wrists, at the silver bands that had defined her existence for 10 years. They were familiar, constant, the only life she had known since 12 years old. Removing them would mean pain, would mean confronting a wolf she barely remembered, would mean facing pack judgment without the excuse of correction. But Damon was right. She was dying. The bands were killing her slowly, ensuring she would never see 30. And some part of her, the part that had survived out of spite, that had refused to give the elders the satisfaction of death, wanted to be free. I want them off, she whispered. But my lord, truly, it will hurt terribly. The bands have been locked so long that flesh has essentially fused to the metal. Removing them will tear skin, will cause bleeding that will not stop easily because the silver has compromised my healing. Are you certain you want to cause me that pain? I am certain I want to free you from a torture that never should have been inflicted, Damon said. The pain of removal will be temporary. The pain of keeping them on is permanent. Yes, Era, I am certain. Before Era could respond, before she could protest or prepare, Damon pulled. The silver band resisted for a moment, locked tight as it had been for a decade. And then Damon's strength, Alpha King strength that exceeded normal wolves, bent the metal. The lock broke. The band came loose, and took skin with it. Era screamed. The band had been locked so long, had burned so deep, that flesh had essentially fused to the metal. Removing it tore away layers of skin, exposed raw tissue beneath, caused bleeding that would have been impossible with the silver suppressing healing. The pain was beyond anything Era had experienced, beyond what she thought pain could be. Damon caught her before she collapsed, supporting her weight while she sobbed. I know, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I know it hurts, but it is done. One band is off. Your left wrist is free. Era looked at her left wrist through tears. The silver band was gone, lying on the floor in a small pool of blood. Her wrist was a horror of burned and torn flesh, bleeding freely, damaged beyond what seemed survivable. But it was also free. For the first time in 10 years, there was no silver touching her left wrist. The other one, Damon said. I need to remove the other one. Can you endure it? Era wanted to say no, wanted to beg him to stop, to leave the remaining band in place, rather than subject her to that agony again. But she also wanted to be free, wanted both wrists liberated, wanted her wolf to have a chance at surfacing after a decade in a silver cage. Do it, she whispered. Damon removed the second band with the same brutal efficiency. More skin tore away, more blood flowed, more screaming that Era could not suppress. And then it was done. Both bands lay on the floor, both wrists were free, and Era was sobbing in Damon's arms while he held her and murmured reassurances she could barely hear over the sound of her own agony. It is done, he said finally. The silver is gone. Your wrists are free. Now we need to get you to healers, get these wounds treated, and let your wolf emerge. Era, you have been suppressed for 10 years. When your wolf finally surfaces, it may be violent or overwhelming. But I will be here. You are safe. I promise you are safe. Era could barely process his words through the pain. She was aware of Damon lifting her, carrying her through the pack house corridors while pack members stared in shock at the blood dripping from her wrists. She was aware of being brought to the healer's quarters, of gentle hands beginning to clean and bandage the wounds. And she was aware of something stirring deep inside her, something that had been caged for so long that she had almost forgotten it existed. Her alpha wolf, sensing freedom for the first time in a decade, began to claw its way toward the surface. The shift, when it came, was agonizing in an entirely different way than the band removal had been. Era's body had not transformed in 10 years. Her wolf had been so deeply suppressed that accessing the shift required breaking through layers of silver-induced blockage. It felt like every bone in her body was breaking, every muscle tearing, every nerve firing at once. But she shifted. After 10 years of suppression, after a decade of believing she would never access her wolf form again, Era transformed. Her alpha wolf emerged massive and powerful, silver-white fur gleaming, presence radiating dominance that made every wolf in the healer's quarters instinctively submit. She was larger than most male alphas, her form speaking of strength that had been compressed for years and was now finally unleashed. Damon, who had remained in the room throughout the shift, stared at her with an expression that combined awe and possessive certainty. And in that moment, as their eyes met, the mate bond snapped into place with overwhelming force. Era felt it hit her even in wolf form, the recognition of destiny, the certainty that this Alpha King was hers and she was his, the bond that the moon goddess herself had decreed. And from the look on Damon's face, he felt it too. He shifted immediately, his own wolf emerging, a massive black beast that radiated even more power than Ira's alpha form. He approached her carefully, respectfully, and touched his nose to hers in the traditional greeting between destined mates. The bond flared brighter, warmer, more certain. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and trauma and violation of having her bands forcibly removed, this felt right. This felt like coming home. They remained in wolf form for hours, Era's body needing time to adjust to finally accessing her true nature again after a decade of suppression. Damon stayed beside her the entire time, his presence protective and supportive, his wolf communicating comfort and safety in ways that transcended words. When they finally shifted back to human form, when Ira was herself again, human and exhausted and bandaged but free, she looked at Damon and whispered, "You are my mate." "I am," Damon confirmed. "I felt it the moment I saw your true form. You are extraordinary, Era. An alpha female. I have read about your kind in ancient texts, but never believed I would be fortunate enough to have one as my destined mate." "I am an abomination," Era said, repeating what she had been told for 10 years. "That is why the bans were necessary, to suppress what should not exist." "You are not an abomination," Damon said firmly. "You are rare and powerful, and exactly what the moon goddess created you to be. Alpha females exist for a reason, Era. They are meant to lead alongside male alphas, to provide balance and strength. The fact that ignorant wolves have tried to erase your kind does not make you wrong. It makes them wrong." Over the following days, as Era's wrists slowly healed from the trauma of band removal, as her wolf adjusted to freedom after a decade of suppression, the full story emerged. Damon called a pack meeting and demanded answers about who had authorized the silver bands, who had locked them on a 12-year-old child, who had allowed this torture to continue for 10 years. The recovery process was longer and more painful than Era had anticipated. The removal of the bands had torn away layers of skin, exposing tissue that had not seen air in 10 years. The wounds bled freely for the first day, her compromised healing unable to stop it quickly. The pack healers worked around the clock to clean the injuries, to apply salves that would prevent infection, to bandage the torn flesh with materials that would not stick to the damaged tissue. But more difficult than the physical healing was the sensation of freedom. For 10 years, Era had felt constant burning in her wrists, constant pressure from the metal, constant reminder that she was suppressed and controlled. Now with the bands gone, her wrists felt light, strange, wrong in their absence of pain. She kept looking down, expecting to see the silver still there, her mind unable to accept that they were truly gone. Her wolf stirred on the second day after removal. It was subtle at first, a presence in the back of her mind that she had not felt in years, a sense of something waiting, something that had been caged finally sensing an opening. Era was terrified of it. This alpha wolf that had caused so much suffering, that had marked her as an abomination, that had ruined her life, she did not want it back. But Damon insisted she needed to shift, to release the wolf that had been suppressed for a decade, to become whole again rather than remaining fractured. "Your wolf is part of you," he explained during one of his daily visits to check on her recovery. "Suppressing it damaged you in ways beyond just the physical burns. You need to integrate both halves of yourself, let your wolf surface and find balance again." "What if it is too strong?" Era asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if I shift and the alpha power is so overwhelming that I lose control? What if I become the abomination the elders feared?" "Then I will be there to help you control it," Damon said firmly. "Era, you are not an abomination. You never were. You are an alpha female, blessed by the moon goddess with power and strength. That is not wrong, that is extraordinary, and I will help you learn to embrace it rather than fear it." The first shift came on the 5th day after band removal. Era's wolf could no longer be contained, could no longer be denied after tasting freedom. The transformation was agonizing, her body having to relearn how to change after a decade of suppression. It felt like every bone was breaking, every muscle tearing, every nerve firing at once. She screamed through it, the pain so intense that she wished the bands were back just to stop this agony. And then the shift completed, and Era was a wolf again for the first time since she was 12 years old. Her alpha form was massive, exactly as she remembered, but somehow more powerful for having been suppressed so long. Her silver-white fur gleamed, her presence radiated dominance that made the healers instinctively lower their heads. And Damon, who had remained in the room throughout the shift, looked at her with an expression of awe and possessive certainty. The mate bond snapped into place in that moment, undeniable and overwhelming. Era felt it even through the disorientation of finally being her true self again. The certainty that this Alpha King was hers, that destiny had chosen him for her, that despite everything that had happened, this was right. Damon shifted immediately, his massive black wolf approaching hers with respect rather than dominance. They touched noses in the traditional greeting, and the bond flared brighter, confirming what they both already knew. They were mates, chosen by the moon goddess, destined for each other. They remained in wolf form for hours. Era's wolf needed time to adjust, to remember how to exist in this body, to relearn movements and senses that had been denied for so long. Damon stayed beside her the entire time, his presence a constant source of support and safety. When they finally shifted back to human form, when Era was herself again, but forever changed by having reclaimed her wolf, she looked at Damon and said simply, "You are my mate. I felt it when I shifted. The bond is real." "It is," Damon confirmed, his storm-gray eyes soft despite the intensity of his presence. "I felt it too. You are mine, Era, and I am yours. The moon goddess chose an alpha female for me. I could not be more honored." The pack meeting Damon called was held 3 days later, once Era was strong enough to attend. Every pack member gathered in the Great Hall, summoned by royal command, aware that something significant was about to be revealed. Elder Merrick sat in his place of honor among the pack elders, looking smug and certain that whatever this meeting was about, his authority would prevail. Damon stood at the center of the hall, Era beside him, her scarred wrists visible to everyone present. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner. I have discovered something disturbing during my inspection of Ironmore Pack. Something that violates every law I enforce, every principle of justice I uphold. 10 years ago, a 12-year-old child shifted for the first time. Her wolf was Alpha, female. And rather than celebrating this rare blessing, rather than recognizing what a gift the moon goddess had bestowed, your elders decided she was an abomination. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Many wolves had known about Era's bans, had known she was being suppressed, but few knew the full story. Damon continued, his voice hardening. They locked silver bands directly against this child's wrists, pure silver, burning constantly, suppressing her wolf completely. They tortured her for 10 years. They told her she was wrong, defective, a corruption that needed correction. And not one of you stopped it. Not one of you questioned whether torturing a child was acceptable, simply because tradition said alpha females should not exist. He turned to Elder Marek. Stand and defend your actions. Explain to me, to everyone here, why you believed a 12-year-old child deserved to be tortured for a decade. Marek stood, his expression righteous and unapologetic. Alpha females are abominations. This has been established law for centuries. They threaten pack hierarchy, challenge male authority, corrupt the natural order. Era was not being tortured, she was being corrected. The silver bands suppressed her unnatural wolf and allowed her to live as she should have been born. We showed mercy by allowing her to live at all. Mercy, Damon repeated, the word dripping with contempt. You call locking burning metal against a child's skin for 10 years mercy. You call suppressing her true nature, damaging her body, ensuring she would die young. You call all of that mercy. He moved closer to Marek, his alpha authority radiating outward in waves that made even the elder instinctively step back. Alpha females are not abominations. They are rare, yes. Powerful, yes. But they are blessed by the moon goddess just as any other wolf. The laws declaring them unnatural are based on fear and misogyny, not divine mandate. And I am abolishing those laws effective immediately across all territories under my authority. Shock rippled through the assembled pack. Centuries of tradition being overturned by royal decree. Everything they had believed about natural order being challenged. Some wolves looked relieved, perhaps having privately questioned the treatment of alpha females. Others looked outraged, seeing this as a threat to their entire worldview. Era is my destined mate, Damon continued. The mate bond formed the moment she shifted into her true form. She is an alpha female, and she is the Luna chosen for me by the moon goddess herself. Anyone who questions that, anyone who continues to believe she is an abomination, can take it up with me directly. He turned back to Merrick. You will be stripped of your elder status and exiled from Ironmore. You will not be allowed to return to any pack under my authority. Consider yourself fortunate I am not executing you for what you did to a child under your supposed protection. Merrick's face went red with fury. You cannot do this. I followed pack law. I upheld tradition. You cannot punish me for doing what was right. I can and I am, Damon said flatly. You tortured a child. That is all I need to know. Guards, remove him from this hall and escort him to the border. He has until sundown to be gone from Ironmore territory. The guards moved immediately, taking Marek by the arms despite his protests. As he was dragged from the hall, he shouted back at Era, You are still an abomination. Removing the bands does not change what you are. You will bring ruin to any pack that accepts you. Era flinched at the words, years of conditioning making them feel true, even when she knew they were not. But Damon's hand found hers, squeezing gently, his presence a reminder that she was not alone in facing this hatred. Over the following weeks, as word spread through neighboring packs about the Alpha King's mate and the new laws protecting alpha females, reactions were mixed. Some packs celebrated the change, relieved that they would no longer need to suppress or execute rare alpha females who emerged. Others resisted, clinging to traditions that declared such wolves unnatural. But Damon's authority was absolute in his territories, and his position was clear. Alpha females were protected. They had the same rights as any other wolf, and anyone who attempted to harm or suppress them would answer directly to him. Era left Ironmoor 3 weeks after Damon removed her bands, her wrists still healing but the wounds finally closing, her wolf finally free after 10 years of suppression. She traveled to Stormhaven knowing that her life would never be the same, that she was leaving behind everything familiar to start over as someone new, as herself, fully and without apology. Elder Marek stood before the assembled pack and defended his decision. Alpha females are abominations. This has been pack law for centuries. They threaten the natural order, challenge male authority, corrupt the hierarchy established by the moon goddess. Ira was corrected as prescribed by tradition. There was nothing wrong with what was done. Everything was wrong with what was done, Damon countered, his voice carrying royal authority that silenced any who might have agreed with Marek. You tortured a child. You locked silver bands that burned her flesh constantly for 10 years. You suppressed her true nature and told her she was a mistake. That is not correction. That is abuse. He looked at the assembled pack members, many of whom had known what was happening to Era but had said nothing. Alpha females are not abominations. They are rare, yes. Powerful, yes. But they are blessed by the moon goddess just as much as any other wolf. The laws that declare them unnatural are based on fear and outdated tradition, not fact. And I am declaring right now that those laws are void in all territories under my authority. The declaration sent shock through Ironmoor pack. Wolves whispered among themselves, some in agreement, some in outrage. Tradition was being challenged, and not everyone welcomed the change. She is your mate, Marek said accusingly. Of course you defend her. But once you leave, once your authority no longer protects her, she will face the consequences of what she is. The pack will not accept an alpha female among them. Then the pack can find a new alpha, Damon said coldly. Because Era is leaving with me. She will live in my territory, under my protection, as my acknowledged mate, and Luna. And Marek, you will face consequences for what you did to her. 10 years of torture does not go unpunished, simply because tradition sanctioned it. Marek was stripped of his elder status and exiled from Ironmoor. Era's parents, who had allowed their daughter to be tortured for a decade, were also held accountable, though their punishment was less severe at Era's request. She had no love for them, but she did not want their blood on her conscience. The silversmith who had made the bands was required to destroy all records and tools related to suppression bands, ensuring no other child would suffer as Era had. And Alpha Henrik of Ironmoor was given a direct order to protect any alpha females who might emerge in his pack, on pain of losing his position. The reforms were comprehensive and absolute. Damon used Era's suffering as catalyst for change, ensuring that no other alpha female would face the same fate. It was small comfort for the decade she had lost, but it was something. Era left Ironmoor 3 weeks after Damon removed her bands, her wrists still healing but no longer bleeding, her wolf free to shift whenever she wished. She traveled to Damon's territory, a fortress city called Stormhaven, where she would learn to be an alpha female without suppression, without shame, without silver bands burning into her flesh. The adjustment was difficult. 10 years of suppression had left Era unsure how to be her true self. Her alpha instincts had been caged so long that accessing them felt foreign and frightening. She struggled with shifting, with controlling her wolf, with accepting that she was allowed to be powerful without punishment. Damon was patient through all of it. He helped her train, taught her to control her alpha strength, showed her that power was not something to fear, but to embrace. He introduced her to his pack as his mate and alpha female, making it clear that she was to be respected and obeyed just as he was. Some pack members struggled with the concept. Centuries of tradition declaring alpha females as abominations could not be erased overnight. But Damon's authority was absolute, and those who could not accept Era learned to keep their objections silent. 3 months after leaving Ironmoor, Era stood in Stormhaven's Great Hall and formally accepted the mate bond with Damon. The ceremony was witnessed by representatives from multiple packs, all coming to see the alpha female who had survived 10 years of silver bands and emerged as their king's chosen Luna. When she spoke her vows, when she accepted Damon as her mate before the assembled packs, Era looked at her wrists, scarred permanently, marked with burns that would never fully fade, evidence of a decade of torture. And she felt not shame but pride. She had survived. She had endured. And now she was free. "I wore silver bands for 10 years, she said during the ceremony, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. They were meant to suppress my alpha wolf forever, to correct what ignorant wolves believed was an abomination. But I am not an abomination. I am an alpha female, blessed by the moon goddess, and I will never be suppressed again." The assembled wolves, even those who harbored doubts about alpha females, could not help but recognize the truth in her words. She was powerful, she was strong, and she had earned her position not through birthright, but through survival. That night, alone with Damon in their private quarters, Era looked at her scarred wrists and said quietly, "I am still angry at you sometimes. For ripping off the bands without warning. For causing that pain. For not giving me more choice in how it happened." "That is fair," Damon said, taking her scarred hands in his. "I violated your body in that moment. I made a choice for you that caused tremendous pain, and I understand if you resent me for it. But," Era continued, "I am also grateful, because you freed me. You ended a torture that would have killed me eventually. You gave me back my wolf. You showed me that being an alpha female is not something to suppress, but something to celebrate. And I cannot regret the outcome, even if I wish the method had been less brutal." "I wish I could have done it differently," Damon admitted. "I wish I could have removed the bands without causing you pain. But Ira, seeing those silver bands burning into your flesh, knowing you had endured that for 10 years, I could not let it continue even one more day, even if it meant hurting you to free you." "I know," Era said, "and I forgive you for the pain, because the freedom was worth it." She wore silver bands to suppress her wolf. The Alpha King ripped them off her wrists, and in doing so, he gave her the life she had been denied for a decade. A life where she could be herself, fully and without apology. What did you think of Era's journey from suppression to freedom? Have you ever hidden part of yourself to survive? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you loved this story of the alpha female who wore burning silver bands and the Alpha King who freed her, hit subscribe and join our pack. New stories drop every week, celebrating wolves who suppress themselves to survive, alpha kings who force liberation, and the courage it takes to embrace your true nature after years of being told it is wrong. Remember, sometimes the person who hurts you to free you is actually saving your life, even if the salvation comes with scars.